There's already a ton of videos on this thing, which is the Sonicake Amp Toast. I don't want to do the same thing that's been done already, so if you have questions about what the modulation sounds like, or the delay, the reverb, the different amp sounds, this is not going to be the video for that because it's already been covered very, very well by other YouTubers, and I thought I would approach this amp in a very different way. So to begin with, the mindset when I was sent this was that I was actually kind of reluctant to do so. I have some really good killer amps in the house. I was thinking, what am I going to do with this thing? It's a small little practice amp, maybe it's cool for jamming outside or something like that, but my my look on this was more as a seasoned guitar player that's a bit too spoiled and has way too much gear. So I had to go back and really think about what I started with as a guitar player. So if you're not much into talking and you just want to get to like audio examples, I'm going to have some timestamps, but this is really more like story time, if you will, with gear. And we're going to be focusing on this guy. You're going to get to hear it. I'm really doing a demo of this thing, but I also wanted to cover like the main differences between what you can get now for $100 compared to what I could get for $100 back in the 80s. So this thing here is the Dean Markley K22. This is something that came out, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s. So you're looking at it, it's got really big speaker. It doesn't have a speaker out. It's pretty limited in terms of features. Let's see here. So you have one input with gain and clean, and that is about it. So you could get some distortion, but this is a solid state amplifier. It's robust, I'll give it that. It has stood the test of time, but the thing is that these little practice amps, they weren't much in the way of giving you a lot of tools. So as a beginner, starting with something very much like this, I didn't have this particular amp when I started, but I had one that was very similar to it. So if you look at what you get now, this is lightweight. There's two speakers inside. You have, I believe it's 7 amp models. You have your chorus, tremolo, delay, and reverb, which is already way more than what I could get with this thing. And I can plop it up pretty much anywhere. It doesn't take much room, as opposed to what I had back in the 90s. It's still pretty heavy. I'm doing the old men grunt as I'm putting this thing here. But in terms of wattage, sure, this thing is a bit louder, but it's still not like anything that's really fun to plug into. You're still going to need pedals if you use an older amp like this. So, yeah, it's small, it's compact, but it's really nothing to do with this. So, other features that you have is like Bluetooth, if you want to connect and use this more like a radio, because it is stereo. You also can use the tuner that's built in. So just hold the button, you got the tuner, you have a few drum loops in here that you can just play at different speeds. And there's a headphone out, which this thing didn't have. So those things, I mean, come on. A drum you can play with, I didn't have that. So I spent like at least 5 years before actually playing with a real drummer. And that was a drag because then when you start to play with a drummer, keeping time with someone else is kind of hard. Here, this is a really cool practice tool. Now, you don't have to just use it as a beginner. You could use this as like your living room amp if ever you want to jam in the living room when you don't feel like going into the studio, turning on your tube amp. But what I was really interested about with this thing when I started to really look into it is, do I just have to use it with electric guitar? Can I use it with bass? Can I use it with acoustic? Now, there is a feature on here called flat, meaning that it doesn't sound like a Vox, it doesn't sound like a Marshall or Mesa Boogie or whatever. It's more of a flat response kind of thing, almost like a DI, if you will, and you get to use the effects. So what I want to do right now is show you what the acoustic sounds like through this thing. We're going to be putting a microphone in front of the amp, but I'm also going to be using the headphone out into the audio interface, because what that's going to do is not color the sound through the speakers, because those speakers, they're small, they sound boxy, it's to be expected. So I'm going to compare both of them. So I'm going to put a SM57 on just one speaker, and we're going to have the auxiliary going in there. I'm going to split it up so you can hear both of them. So that means if you want to get this to do some home recording, that's a great way to do it, just to come out of the auxiliary and going to your audio interface input. Or if you really want to go old school and put a microphone, you can do that. So if you think outside the box, really bad wordplay here, but if you think in a different way, there's some more stuff you can do with this than just playing straight up guitar. So we're going to try bass, we're going to try acoustic, I'm going to try some cool stuff. I'll show you the amps, just small samples of what they sound like. And at the end, I'm going to let you know who I think this would be cool for. So if you're looking at stuff like this, there's a lot of little amps like this on the market. So why would the Sonicake make sense for you? So I'm going to give you my opinion at the end. Know that this is a sponsored video in the sense that they sent this to me in exchange for a video, but Sonicake didn't have a say in what kind of format I was going to do, and I'm not paid to do this demo, so my opinion is not paid and bought for. I get free range on saying what I think about this particular amp. So if you're into that, watch the video or skip to the end if you just want to get the lowdown on the Amp Toast. So we're going to start with acoustic, then bass, and then we're going to get to the electric guitar. If you enjoyed this video so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really helps this channel grow when you do that. And also, if you want to give it a thumbs up if you like the video, that also lets me know what kind of content to make for you. So let's get back to the video. So the Amp Toast, what do I think? Now I'm going to give you my general impression of this unit. I'm going to tell you who I think it's for, and I'm also going to share the pros and cons because there's definitely some cool things about it, and there's a few things that the company could probably fix in a future version, which would make this even more of a solid contender. So what do I think? For the price point and for what they aim to do with this, whether you're practicing at home, whether you want to bring this when you're traveling, maybe you play this in your hotel room or at the cottage, or whatever the scenario may be, you're playing outside with some friends, they have acoustics, you have the electric, you plug into this. It's loud enough, it's going to keep up. It's not too loud, it's just loud enough that, you know, if you're at speaking level, this is almost on top of your normal talking voice. So enough poop in here to throw out some fairly decent volume, depending on the room, of course, that you're in. The effects, I find that some of them are better than others. And I find that the way I'm looking at it, like the reverb, not the first reverb, but the second one, which is more like a room. I think that's what they titled it. No, it's plate. The plate reverb's actually really good in this. I don't know if they ever think about making that plate reverb into one of the little mini pedals that they do, but they probably should because it sounds really good. So I don't know what algorithm they're using, but I like the plate reverb on this one. As for the delay, the analog sounded good, but I actually preferred the digital delay, which is the second one. And the chorus and the tremolo, in my opinion, were both usable, but like they didn't stand out to me. They're not effects that I tend to gravitate towards to begin with, so I might be a little biased on my opinion on here. In terms of the amplifiers, I really like the lead, which is more of a, I guess it's their take on the Mesa Boogie, but it has like this hunky feel, almost like a parked wah, and so did the distortion. So both of these had like those early Scorpions type of guitar tone, which I like. But if you're looking for the authentic sounds, that might not be like a good representation of those tones for you. But for me, I didn't care what it was based on. I heard that sound. I was like, okay, this is the 1980s, that real mid-forward type of tone. I thought it was cool. The AC30 sound in here is actually really good. I've heard some emulation sometimes that sound too boxy. This one doesn't do it. It sounds more like what you would expect from a recorded tone of the AC30. And surprisingly, my favorite tone in the whole unit was actually the Roland JC120, which I thought sounded really good because if you crank up the gain, you end up with this nice light breakup, which I don't know if the original does, but this model does. So I'm not someone who's going to use the built-in tuner. I'm not someone who's going to use the built-in drum or the Bluetooth capabilities to make this into a radio. But for someone who needs those for the money, I mean, it's packed with options. I'm sure there are more advanced ones that I'm not aware of, but for what it is today while I'm doing this demo, I think that this is a good choice. The cons with the unit, the things that I find are not deal breakers at all, but they're just something that distracts me, is that when you instantiate the effects, there's this drop in volume and then it swells back in. Now, it's probably just due to the kind of effect that they're using. That's a byproduct of this result. But for me, it was a bit distracting because every time I would turn, I would hear that dip. It would come back again. And if I was trying to do something that was seamless, it would cut out in the demo. Now, if you're at home and you're not a YouTube guy trying to, show people what this thing can do, that might not be a consideration for you at all. My next point, which is still with the effects, is that the effects are not calibrated to the same volume. So where you would expect something like kicking in the effect and that it would be at the same level as your guitar, sometimes when you kick in one effect over the other, depending which one you decide to dial in. For example, if I'm going for the very first reverb, there's a significant drop in volume. And then when you get to the second reverb, that one is nice, loud, and clear. So I was like, okay, maybe that's something with the power supply. So I checked the power supply and it's not. I really think that it's the way that the effect was dialed in for this unit. The same thing happened with the delay. The first delay sounds a bit more tame compared to the second one. And then when you get to the tremolo and chorus, both of them I found were just under the original signal in terms of loudness. Like I said, it's not a deal breaker, but those are just things that I've noticed and I wanted to share with you. And obviously the folks at Sonicake, if they ever watch the video, they'll know that maybe that's something in a forward, like a future iteration of this thing. They can probably check that out, because the noise floor is more than acceptable. This is not a noisy unit. The models sound good. The effects sound good. It's just those two things that will dip when you instantiate the effect, and the fact that the effects are not the same loudness and that you have no control over it. I think if you can fix that, then you have yourself a very solid unit. Very good. I'm actually going to probably use this whenever I'm setting up guitars, so I can check the intonation. I can check that, you know, if I do pickup swap, because usually I have to go from my kitchen where I work, and in here, turn on the amps, plug everything in. And with this, I can just set it up on the table with a cable, and there you go. If you enjoyed this episode, I have plenty of videos with Sonicake pedals. So if you want to watch some of those, there's going to be a playlist appearing on screen right now. And I'm going to see you in the next one. Cheers.